So speaking of contrast, you had Joe Biden after his incredible State of the Union address talking about his accomplishments and all the positive things he was able to get done in the wake of the Trump presidency, coming into the White House literally barricaded after January 6th and being able to move forward, persevere, and pass countless legislation, even bipartisan legislation, that has improved the economy.
Oh, yeah.
This is a fact.
Again, about the American people.
Exactly. So you have all those messages resonating after the speech as he goes out on the campaign trail. And then, meanwhile, Donald Trump, he's at Mar-a-Lago hosting Hungary's autocratic prime minister, Viktor Orban, on Friday. To quote, to discuss a wide range of issues affecting Hungary and the United States. Orban, who has close ties to Russian President Vladimir Putin, has refused to provide any aid to Ukraine while seeking to turn his own country into an illiberal state. Trump has repeatedly bragged about having Orban's endorsement for his 2024 campaign and at a dinner on Friday fawned over the Hungarian leader.
There's nobody that's better, smarter, or a better leader than Viktor Orban. He's fantastic. As you know, the Prime Minister of Hungary and does a great job. He's a non-controversial figure because he said this is the way it's going to be, and that's the end of it, right? He's the boss. And no, he's a great leader.
So, Kathy, again, I've been warning that he keeps bringing up Viktor Orban for a reason. Viktor Orban, who brags about getting rid of Western-style democracy, who brags about being in a liberal state, who has arrested and jailed competing politicians, members of the press, driven them out of the country, has actually bugged the phones of rival politicians and journalists. You name it, he's done it. And this is who Donald Trump admires. And he says he's non-controversial because he says what he wants and he gets it done. He's the boss. And Trump, of course, said that in the most admiring of ways. That's what America looks like under Donald Trump's second term, if we take him at his own words, right?
Yeah, I thought that line about he's not controversial because he says what he wants and he gets it done, he's the boss, was so reflective. I mean, you know, projection, confession, that was total projection of what Donald Trump would like. I mean, Viktor Orban is proud of the fact that he's made Hungary what he calls an illiberal democracy. I'm not quite sure whether those two things can actually be possible together. How do you have a democracy that's illiberal? That goes against the very strain of democracy. But anyway, that's what he's done by packing the courts with his cronies, by weighing in on judicial cases, by making it incredibly difficult for journalists to do any kind of independent reporting. They are told by their editors what facts they can report before they actually are allowed to write their articles. That's the kind of state that Donald Trump down there in Mar-a-Lago in that speech seems to be admiring. It's also the state, you know, Tucker Carlson went to Viktor Orban to kind of pay homage to his type of leadership. There is a strain there in the MAGA movement that clearly admires those illiberal democracies, autocratic-leaning countries. And again, it's tied up with Russia. The EU had to lean very heavily on Viktor Orban, basically threatening him with other punishments if he didn't go ahead and agree to an EU package of aid to Ukraine, because he didn't want to. He didn't want to do something that would get in the way of Vladimir Putin. And you see that these things are linked. It's a circular movement that we see from what Donald Trump is doing down in Mar-a-Lago, Tucker Carlson's visit to Moscow, and Viktor Orban's relationship with Vladimir Putin.
Well, you have in Donald Trump a guy who said he's going to terminate the Constitution. He's going to be a dictator on day one. He would like to execute generals for not being lackeys, for treason. Said he could use SEAL Team 6 to execute his political opponents and not be arrested. And you go through all of this long list.
You go through his presidency and things that he said and did in his presidency. You don't just have what he's saying. You have now a record.
Well, and even in his presidency, where in the last 2 weeks he said he was demanding that his attorney general arrest Joe Biden and Joe Biden's family because he was behind in the polls and said he should send him to jail. So you have all of this happening. We talked about the young Republicans who unfortunately have had their bearings like twisted by this to become unrecognizable. And you look at, I saw Vaughn Hilliard interviewing people at Trump rallies talking about civil war, saying that if they didn't win this time, they were going to use violence. They're going to take over state legislatures. They were going to take over courts. They were going to come to Washington. They were going to take over Washington. Charlie Sykes, this is not a test run. This is a guy that's told his followers, if I win, I'm going to be a dictator. And his followers are all in. And again, Charlie, how perverse that it's people that I went to church with, evangelicals, a lot of them that seem to be swept up into this totalitarianism, this authoritarianism, and also small government Republicans, Tea Party types that wanted small government. They're now begging for an autocrat, for a tyrant, for a dictator.
And all of this is happening in broad daylight, in real time, and there's no subtlety, there's no secret about it. As Katie mentioned, he's leaning into his embrace of illiberal authoritarianism. He says it out loud. And speaking of his the younger Republicans on the bench, you have people like Nancy Mace now who are forced to go out and justify the fact that this illiberal authoritarian who's talking about civil war is also been found liable for rape. So you begin to put together this picture, what Republicans are embracing right now, what they are endorsing, and what Donald Trump is bringing into this campaign. Because Donald Trump is not going to get better. I think throughout 2024, what you're going to see is his inability to restrain his id. And the fact that he's up there on stage at Mar-a-Lago talking about, he's not controversial because he's the boss. He says something and it's over. This is clearly something that he admires. This is clearly something that he aspires to. And yes, it's alarming. And I know there are people out there who say, look, you guys are engaging in Trump derangement syndrome. Just simply listen to Donald Trump. Listen to what he is saying. Listen to what his supporters are saying on a daily basis. It's not a secret.
Well, he is preparing everybody for what he's going to do. When he says he's, talks about terminating the Constitution, he says he's going to be a dictator on day one. When he talks about executing generals who are insufficiently loyal or finding media outlets guilty of treason, when he talks about all the things he's doing, when he says, he argues in court that he can execute political opponents using SEAL Team 6, and he can't get in trouble for it. When he says that in court, then he's telling people what he's going to do, and yet these younger Republicans just fall in line. They're going to lose. They're going to destroy their careers. And you look at Nancy Mace, even after Donald Trump is found liable for sexual assault, and a judge says, really, he raped E. Jean Carroll.
And there are other women who have also accused him of rape. Right. And there are other deals that have been struck that actually the prosecution, the Alvin Bragg case, they want to bring. They want to bring forward to show that this is a pattern of behavior. So 91 counts, then a sexual assault, then fraud. I'm sorry, I just want to go over his legal challenges.
I've just got to say, I was speaking specifically of Nancy Mace. A judge talks about Donald Trump raping a woman, and because she has no choice but to blindly defend Donald Trump, she defends a man that a judge says is a rapist and does it without apology. And again, you see, I could talk about Katie Britt, but I could also talk about Marco Rubio. Once one of the most promising stars in the Republican Party, was called the future of the Republican Party by Time, I think it was. Now just a shell of his former self politically. You look at all these people, Rand Paul, that were criticizing Donald. Ted Cruz, we could go on and on. They just all fall in line. It's sad and it's pathetic. And they're all going to lose. It's just like Trump's going to lose again. And for some reason, they can't pull out of this political death spiral.
Right, and we should show the Nancy Mace exchange at some point because she accuses the reporter of shaming her.
When all he's doing is asking, actually, that she tells the truth for once about Donald Trump. Still adding more.